Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting. Hello, Jackie.
Hello, Robin.
How are you doing today? What's going on?
It's a busy day. A lot of the roads were very clear. It's spring break here in Chicago this week. So that part was nice. I got to my office in like 10 seconds.
Isn't that nice?
It
Chicago
is nice.
Traffic when it changes.
Yes. I work with so many college students, so it's a busy time of year. I think just from a school standpoint, a lot of students are realizing, holy cow, I need to get it together.
Yes.
It's a time of testing, and juniors are starting to look at different things, and families and adults are, I'm finding a lot of people are wanting to come in and even talk about different job changes. And I think it's a time of year that there's a lot of stress and transition.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I remember our days back at the hospital. We worked at the behavioral health hospital, and it was such an interesting time because these most amazing kids would come through the door and just would feel so hopeless and helpless sometimes, and really looking and helping them to change their mindset, really kind of working in a way that was collaborative with the families, and to see that change happen. It was always a lot of fun. That was my memory. I mean, it was difficult, yes, but it was just a lot of fun to see those kids starting to see how life could be different than what they were kind of thinking it was in that moment, right?
Yes, for sure. And I love the conversation we're going to have today.
Yes.
As you know, we have executive coaches here that work with students on college prep. I love that we're having an opportunity today to dive in and talk a little bit more about just trends, with all of the, SAT, ACT, and other testing along with the College Board. So I think this is going to be a great conversation this morning.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really exciting. Dr. Patel is going to join us. He is the founder and CEO of Prep Expert. Folks, you may have seen him on ABC's Shark Tank. Prep Expert, it's an educational company that's helped more than 100,000 students improve their ACT and SAT scores. Dr. Patel himself raised his own SAT score and really believes in helping and supporting families. He's a board-certified dermatologist. He was named one of the Inc. magazine's 30 Under 30, and he holds a degree from Yale and the University of California. So I think we've got someone pretty good here to help us through this conversation, Jackie. Thank you, Dr. Patel, for joining us, and welcome.
Hey, Robin. Hey, Jackie. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk all about test prep, test anxiety, and hopefully give parents and students some good tips to ace these upcoming exams.
Yes, absolutely. As Jackie said, and what I'm seeing as well here in Kansas, there's just a lot of stress for students and for families, right? Getting prepared and going to college is the stressful time. And all of us here are really into supporting those families. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your journey and what brought you to the world of helping students and families and preparing and creating those strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I never thought that I would start a test prep company. Yeah, I never thought I'd be here, but it all actually started in high school when I was a very good student, probably like many of the parents with good students here listening in your audience. I got straight A's. I was good in English, good in math, etc. However, I was not a very good standardized test taker. I had a lot of test anxiety. I did not know the first thing about test prep, college admissions, scholarships. My parents didn't go to school in the United States. I attended public schools in Las Vegas, Nevada, which Vegas isn't exactly known for excellent education. So we had about a 37% high school dropout rate. And
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty staggering. And so on the very first SAT that I ever took, I barely scored above average. And so I had big ambitions, though. I wanted to get into competitive universities, medical programs. And so I began studying for the SAT. I really started my test prep probably around 10th grade. And I was doing self-studying. So I was basically going to the library, especially in the summers, for many hours a day. Eventually, I was able to raise my own SAT score 640 points to a perfect score.
Wow.
Yeah, it was something that only 0.02% of all students achieve. That completely changed my life in that it opened up opportunities to go to top universities. And I also got a $500,000 in college scholarships to, go to college for free, which was really nice because I didn't have to take on any student loans or debt. And then because my life had changed, I wanted to help other students improve their own test scores to improve their own lives. And, so I started working on a book when I was in college. And what ended up happening is, I pitched it out to 100 literary agents and publishers. Everyone said the SAT prep market's too competitive. A book will never work. And so I took that curriculum and I started Prep Expert. And in the very first course that I ever taught, the very first SAT course, my students had an average score improvement of 376 points in just 6 weeks. And so that was pretty incredible, taking students from the 50th percentile and putting them in the 90th percentile. So of course, I had parents and students who wanted more courses. I began training other instructors to teach my curriculum, and the rest is history. Over the past 12 years at Prep Expert, we've helped over 100,000 students improve their test scores, get into top colleges, and win over $100 million in college scholarships. And the best part was McGraw-Hill, the world's largest education publisher, did come back and give me a book deal. And I think for anyone who gets rejected by book publishers, agents, or even outside as an entrepreneur, just keep trying. And, the book I ended up publishing with McGraw-Hill ended up selling over 50,000 copies, going #1 for SAT prep on Amazon. And so, I think I was able to prove my worth that way.
Yes.
That's awesome. And I think so many are, as we've discussed, so many are looking for ways to improve their performance around testing at many different levels. And I know since the pandemic, we've seen a lot of changes happening just with formalized SAT, ACT testing. Have you seen that also?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a really big misconception or kind of just a perception around, parents believing that SATs and ACTs are no longer important because many colleges are test optional. You and I had this discussion right before we started recording. I really think there's three major reasons that parents and students should still take the test. The first reason is there's been a lot of evidence now, and you can look at the research and data that shows that even at test optional colleges, students have higher acceptance rates when they have test scores. And at some colleges, it's as much as 200% more, so 2 times more or 3 times more in some cases. So it really increases your chances of getting in. Reason number two that I believe is even more important is scholarships. So there's billions of dollars in merit-based scholarships that are awarded based on grades, test scores, and extracurriculars. And so it significantly improves your chances of getting scholarships, not only from the colleges themselves, but also from private companies like Coca-Cola, Toyota, and McDonald's. And the third major reason is many colleges are just bringing back the standardized test as a requirement. We've seen places like MIT, Yale, Dartmouth, Purdue, Georgetown, all very recently, Brown, bring back SATs and ACTs as a requirement.
Yeah, and I know that the USA Today reported, and you can, describe this in 2024, that there's going to be, it sounds like students are going to be taking the exams on their laptop or possibly even tablets. And I know it's some of the local high schools around us in the Chicagoland area, they have already started piloting this in many of the schools. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and the app that they're going to use to do that?
Yeah, so there's been big changes both to the SAT and the ACT going more computer based. Speaking first on the SAT, because that one fully has transitioned at this point to digital. So a lot of people think that you can take the SAT digitally at home. Unfortunately, no, you can't have ChatGPT open answering all your questions. You still got to go to an approved testing center. Like you said, take it on a laptop or an approved testing device tablet. And a lot of the content has changed too, which I'm happy to discuss. but it is a different experience for students. So they really need to get ready for it. You can get ready for it using the College Board's Blue Book app. That's the official testing application for the digital SAT. Now, for the ACT, the other major college admission standardized test, they're starting to pilot the computer-based ACT in many markets, as you mentioned. And so that one actually is interesting because the ACT has not changed the content or the format of the questions. So it's going to be very similar in terms of preparation. But both exams, ACT hasn't officially announced a full transition. So it really depends on which market you're in and if they're testing computer-based or not. But for SAT, everyone's gone digital now as of March of 2024. And it doesn't look like they're going to go back to a paper-based exam.
Okay. Interesting, because it is kind of an adjustment. Do you see any other differences between that and how you're prepping students versus the typical paper? I know for me, like I tend to do better with paper because that's what I'm used to. Do you see any other differences or any other approaches you're having to take with your students that you're working with or possibly coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I agree with you in that many test taking strategies rely on paper and pencil. So the way that we get around that with, our strategies and coaching at Prep Expert is you are given scratch paper during the exam. And so, we tell our students to keep their pencils glued to the scratch paper, work out the math problems on the scratch paper, get rid of answer choices, work out the grammar, answer the passage-based reading questions ahead of time on your scratch paper. So it's interesting, even though it's a digital exam, I still think students are going to be using paper and pencil quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah, because and it's interesting too. The other thing that'll be interesting is for so many, and I don't know if you find this too, it's really about teaching students the timing.
Yeah, I think timing is a huge component of both the SAT and the ACT. One thing I will say that College Board noticed with timing is exactly what you said, is that students really struggled with, being able to complete questions on time. Mm-hmm. So I think, in this redesign of the SAT to the digital SAT, they did keep that in mind. And I do have good news for parents listening. The digital SAT is the shortest version of a college admission standardized test ever created. So it's only 2 hours and 14 minutes long and only 98 questions. So, I'm sure Jackie Robin and me, when we took our SATs, they were 3-4 hours long, right? So and they were 150 to 200 questions, the paper-based version. So it's a lot shorter. On top of that, students are going to have more time per question. So they'll have 1 minute and 22 seconds on this new digital SAT on average per question versus the old SAT was around 1 minute and 5 seconds. So it's a 15-20% increase. And then it's about a 50% increase over the ACT, which gives students only 49 seconds per question. So if you are struggling with time, I think that this new digital SAT offers some great opportunities to give you more time per question than ever before.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, big thing that a lot of people talk about, equity. The USA article that Jackie referenced earlier, that's one thing they talked about was, is this going to be addressing that issue? And as you said, I know they have made some changes. Do you think there is anything in terms of differences with this new version that's going to address the equity problem that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that, I'll preface my answer with this. I think that standardized tests are certainly not perfect in terms of being equitable. However, I challenge that argument with, what is more equitable across the United States when you're comparing students, right? So with respect to, GPA, the problem with using GPA is there's been so much grade inflation over the past 20 years in high schools that now 47% of all high school seniors graduate with an A average. So it's really hard to differentiate and get granular. With respect to extracurricular activities, I would say that's even less equitable because typically only the wealthiest families can start nonprofits, do expensive summer programs, do sports like fencing, water polo, golf. And then, the college essay personal statement, it's hard to even know nowadays with ChatGPT, as well as a lot of college admissions consulting, working on people's essays, what their real writing ability is. So, I think that there's no perfect answer to, how do we make college access equitable? I think standardized tests have worked though, and they've worked for almost 100 years. Not saying that they're perfect, but if you look at the studies that came out from Yale and Dartmouth when they reinstated standardized testing, they actually showed that by removing standardized tests, it actually hurt low income and underprivileged students the most. And the reason
Oh,
for
wow.
that, yeah, it was super interesting. It's very counterintuitive to what you might think. And the reason for that is many students who came from inner city public schools, they did not submit their test scores, even though they had like, a 1300 or 1400 on the SAT or a 28 or 30 on the ACT, thinking that it would hurt them. But in reality, when they were one standard deviation above the rest of the students at their school, from their naturally gifted abilities. Yale, Dartmouth, Brown, all of them said these students would have gotten in actually. And so it's super interesting. I think it's very counterintuitive to the narrative that standardized tests only favor the wealthy. I think extracurriculars are, but if you don't take standardized tests, you have to weigh extracurriculars more. And I think that biases wealthy families even more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are families embracing these changes, or do you think families are really struggling?
I think that most families are not embracing the changes because anytime something is new or different, like digital exams, people are going to kind of be afraid of change. Most people want to stick with the paper-based exams, but what I would say about the digital SAT is I think it's the most student-friendly version of the SAT ever created. As I mentioned, it's the shortest exam, the fewest number of questions, more time per question. The reading passages are, they're short 100-word passages. They're not 750 words like the previous paper-based SAT. They're one question per passage. They don't have obscure vocabulary anymore. You can use the calculator on all the math sections. There's no more sections where there's no calculator allowed. So I think parents and students just need to learn a little bit more about this digital exam. And if they do that, they will see that it's a welcome change compared to the previous paper versions.
Okay.
Yes, I agree. And I think the other thing I noticed too at a couple of schools that were piloting it is the schools weren't confident in administrating it. So like it made the students nervous because there were some glitches, just getting it going. But I think absolutely you're right. Once folks get more used to it, I think they're going to appreciate it more because it does sound like overall it makes things a little bit more streamlined. I've heard several students the recommendation you should take each test. You might find that one you fit with more than the other in terms of taking the SAT and the ACT. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that the majority of students take both exams, at least a practice exam of both to see where they're better at baseline. I mean, the exams are more similar than ever before, at least on the digital side. However, I would still suggest that, like, for example, the ACT has a science section. There's a little bit more English on it. So if you favor kind of English and reading, you might want to go for ACT. But I would just take both exams, see which one. They have concordance tables where you can translate the scores from one to the other. And, colleges and scholarships, they do not favor one exam over the other. There's really no harm in taking both, seeing which one you're going to score higher on, which one you feel more comfortable, and which one you want to prep more for. It's really interesting. Some students just really do well with the SAT, and other students do really well with the ACT. I don't have a good reason for that because they are so similar. Yeah, that would be my recommendation is take both exams and see how you do.
Do you have any recommendations for how early a student should start prep in high school?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my recommendation is actually counter to what a lot of high school counselors will tell students. The general advice that most parents and students are given is, start your SAT or ACT prep in spring of 11th grade, spring of junior year. However, I think that's a little too late. And the reason that I think it's too late is because the PSAT, so the preliminary SAT, occurs in fall of 11th grade, so fall of your junior year. And the reason that that exam is so important is because for high achieving students, you have a really good opportunity to qualify for national merit if you score high on that exam. And national merit, essentially, not only is it a great accolade to have on your college resume, but it also opens up the opportunity to get half tuition and full tuition scholarships to over 100 universities across the nation. So many of these scholarships are worth $100,000 to $150,000 to even $200,000. And so in order to qualify for national merit, you have to score high on the PSAT. Now the cutoff score depends on the state in which you live. So, the cutoff score for Illinois, where Jackie is, or Kansas, where Robin is, or where Nevada, where I'm at, are all going to be different depending on how well students in your particular state score. But nevertheless, I think it's an amazing opportunity for a student to be able to take a 2-hour exam, score well on it, and get $100,000 scholarship to a university, just given how expensive college has gotten. If maybe if the audience, if your employer said you had to study for a 2-hour exam and they'll give you $100,000 bonus, I'm guessing most of us would study for that.
Yes,
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
If I had to pick one point in time for a student to start prepping during high school, it would be the summer between 10th and 11th grade, or beginning of 11th grade, because, that will help them hopefully, do well on the PSAT, qualify for national merit. You could take the SAT or ACT in the fall as well and kill two birds with one stone. If you don't do well enough, you always can take it again in the spring. And so, like you said, it's not for every student, but I definitely think for motivated, high achieving students who are willing to study for these exams, that's definitely the right path forward.
Yeah. This entire process can be confusing. It can be overwhelming for families. And I really think about, the first generation, families that are really looking at this for the first time. Is there any advice that you give for families on how to handle this whole process and supporting the students? Because I'm sure as all of the work that you're doing with the students, you're also working and talking with the families. Is there any advice that you would give?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that worked well for me and works well for my students is really working backwards. So what do I mean by that? One of the reasons I was so self-motivated to study for the SAT in high school is I wanted to get into what are called BSMD combined medical programs. So these are highly competitive programs that allow students to get into med school from high school. So I'd identified, that was my goal. And then I knew that I needed a high SAT score because I looked at the average SAT scores. What I needed to do from a grades perspective was, get straight A's. And what I needed to do from an extracurricular perspective was, volunteer at hospitals and do medical related activities. And so that really kind of created a guide for me for what I needed to be doing, when I needed to be doing it, as well as it instilled in me a lot of internal and self-motivation because I had a goalpost. So, I'm not saying that every parent or student listening needs to go to a medical program, but what I am saying is define, what those end goals are. Is it to get into a certain, few universities that are your top choices? Is it to, get a half tuition or full tuition scholarship? If you start with that, then it makes it much easier to identify, okay, what are the scores I need to achieve? What are the grades I need to achieve? What are the extracurriculars I need to do? But if you have no idea what the end goals are, not only will you not know what to do, but your student won't have the motivation necessary to do the work.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, and I think so many families get overwhelmed, SAT, ACT. We spend a lot of time, working with students because a lot of the anxiety comes from this number. I need to get a number or I'm a failure. I need to get, and we talk a lot about on here, every student is different and it's about growth. It's about progress. Some students score really, really high. Some students, like I've had students that go from, had a 20 and, they use some of your resources and they went up to, a 26 or a 27. That's amazing. I always tell students, you don't have to get a certain number per se. It's about just learning about yourself in the process, doing the best you can, learning tips and tools to improve your performance. Because I know a lot of students feel very defeated by the test scores and really just helping them reframe, which I believe is a lot of what goes into the test performance anxiety is the pressure they put on themselves for those very reasons. And I love your approach about how it is about learning strategies that you can use for the test, but also you can use in life. There's strategies just learning how, to face assessments, which we're all going to have at different points in our life, right? How to walk into it, how to deal with the stress of it all. So I love the package and the resources you you offer students.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's really important to, and that's one of the things I do with my courses and books at Prep Expert is to teach students not only about these standardized tests, but, I teach what are called general expert strategies. So what do I mean by that? I mean, these are strategies that are going to help students with all of academics and all of even their career in life. So things like time management, things like self-control, delayed gratification, hard work, because, those are all skills that I learned through studying for the SAT when I was in high school. But I believe, all of these skills that I just mentioned, especially, self-control, hard work, delayed gratification, those skills are necessary to succeed not only on standardized tests, but in your future high school classes, your college classes, your grad school classes, but even in your career, right? And so it's really, really important that whatever vehicle you choose to learn these skills, whether it's standardized tests, or maybe, you learn it in your career much later, or maybe you learn it through your AP classes, or maybe you learn it through doing project work. However you learn it, I think it's very, very important to learn because that will create a framework for success for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I know you shared a lot of resources. Do you have any other recommendations for families now? Maybe they have, a sophomore, maybe they have a junior. Do you have any recommendations for families just kind of given the services you offer?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things you can do. So the first thing I would do was start with some free diagnostic tests. So as we mentioned, if you're going to go down SAT path, the College Board's Blue Book app is completely free, preloaded with free digital SAT questions. That'll give your student a really good idea of the test format, question types, etc. For ACT, they also offer free computer-based ACT exams. Just go to ACT.com. So ACT Inc. is the company you'd go for that. After that, for the stress, so I believe there's really two key parts to it is practice questions. I really believe in using the official test questions from the test creator. So I just kind of gave the resources for that. After that, I do believe it's not just enough to practice with the exams, but you have to actually learn strategies that will help you in terms of, as we've been talking about with test anxiety, test timing, there's techniques and tools you can use to solve different question types more efficiently. For that, of course, I recommend my own company, Prep Expert. I just released a brand new book for the digital SAT called Prep Expert Digital SAT Playbook that you can find on Amazon. And if you're looking for full digital SAT or ACT courses, so we do online courses and tutoring, you can find that at prepexpert.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we are to the end and ready to ask our 3 questions. Are you ready, Dr. Patel?
I'm ready.
Okay, let me read those to you and then you can decide. You can answer 1, you can answer 2, or you can answer all 3. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. Number 1, what did you do as a child or teenager that would drive your parents crazy? Number 2, what is the biggest difference between children and teenagers today and when you grew up? And number 3, what does successful parenting mean to you? Take it away.
I'll answer all 3 questions.
Okay.
So question number 1, I believe, was what did I do to drove my parents crazy? So I played a lot of video games and I watched a lot of TV. And so I had a very little actually self-control or self-discipline, especially like in middle school. I would say I wasn't a very good student. And so I drove my parents crazy because of that. Eventually my parents hounded me enough to take education really seriously. And luckily I became a good student by the time high school came around. But middle school, I'd say, yeah, those were two of my really bad habits. But I'm glad I got it out of my system. I will say that.
Yes.
Question number 2 was, what's the biggest difference between students today and students when I was in school? I mean, I think it's got to be all of the social media, TikTok, Instagram. I have a strategy in my book called Turn Off the Tech, because there's just so many distractions with tech and social media. I feel good for everyone that everyone's more connected, but it's really hard to turn that off and really focus and study.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I definitely teach our students at Prep Expert is you got to zone out all the noise. You got to zone out the scrolling when you really want to get serious work done or serious studying done.
Mm-hmm.
Successful parenting to me is leading by example. So, I think that one of the reasons that I do work so hard in my own life and that I took academics really seriously is because, my dad worked from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. He would wake up at 5, go get to the pharmacy job from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Then he'd work at our motel after till 10 p.m. I mean, he just worked so hard. And that was a really great example for me on hard work and dedication and what it can, do for you in your own life. And so I just encourage all parents listening to try to lead by example. Not that you have to work 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., but lead by
Right.
example for your student, to make education a priority. And I think that was a winning formula for me and so many of our students at Prep Expert as parents who do take their education seriously for their child.
Right. It's a lot about that modeling. We can say things to our children 50 times, then they might not listen, but often they are watching and they will do what we did. And I have adult children and I absolutely see them doing that with their children today. So it is interesting. They definitely watch us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patel. Listeners, we will have all of Dr. Patel's information in the description for our podcast episode. And those resources that he mentioned, we will have those in as well. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Jackie. It's been a pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.